Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today to kick off Armory Live, the fair's dedicated talks program, which will take place over the next 4 days. Armory Live convenes prominent art world figures for a series of thought-provoking conversations and panels, which we hope will spark dialogue and exchange here at the fair. Today's program begins with James Tarmy, art market writer at Bloomberg, who will lead a conversation on the future of the gallery model with Evan C. Beard, National Art Services Executive at U.S. Trust, Marianne Boesky, owner and founder of Marianne Boesky Gallery, Andrea Danese, co-founder and CEO of Athena Art Finance, Marguerite Hoffman, collector, and Wendy Olsoff, co-founder of P.P.O.W. Gallery, bringing together a diverse group of voices from across the industry to discuss innovation, consolidation, and what the future of the gallery model looks like. You don't want to hear from me, you want to hear what they have to say. So thank you so much for joining us, and please be sure to check out the full Armory Live schedule for a list of events tomorrow and this weekend. Enjoy. James?
Okay. So we're going to talk for around 45 minutes and then open it up for 15 minutes or so of questions. The fundamental kind of premise of this panel sort of has started with a negative proposition, which is to say that the middle of the art market, however you want to define that, is in some way in jeopardy. And so this panel is going to kind of try to talk about whether or not that's true from anecdotal perspectives of the panelists themselves, and also kind of just try to talk about the future of this sector specifically that everyone here represents or has an interest in or engages with kind of going. Is that okay? So I think what makes sense is to start off by actually articulating what this sort of middle of the market is. Is this mic working? Anyway, what the middle of the market is as everyone here understands it, because going forward, as people kind of talk about these issues, that will obviously be quite important so that everyone is talking about the same thing, or by the same token, that we understand that we're talking about different things and have different perspectives. And so, Wendy, I would love for you to kind of start this off by really talking about, from your own perspective, how we describe this concept of the middle and what it means to you.
Okay. Is this working? Yeah. So just briefly, I opened my gallery in 1983 in the East Village. So that's 35 years ago. And I was in the East Village, then I was in Soho, then I was in Chelsea. So we started obviously as a very small business with my partner, Penny Pilkington, and myself. And now we have 10 people working for us, or 9.5 people working for us. So when I read articles about the middle, I mean, I think I'm at the top, but when I read about the middle, I think, oh, gee, that must be me. And all the other galleries, mostly that I've grown up with, who I've seen rise and have different programs, and I think about it a lot. And for me, that middle is the huge and major part of the art world. It's not the new galleries opening that have to define themselves. It's not the top of the market, but the big galleries that have 200 people working for them. It's the galleries that have between maybe 4 to 20 people, 1 or 2 locations. It's a very big, nebulous field, but it encompasses almost all the galleries you will see at 3 art fairs this week. And everyone is different in that in these galleries. They're all individuals with different points of view and programs and stories and histories and artists and experiences. And I think to define it as a thing that is suffering in any way is a gross generalization that we could talk more about.
Okay, just to kind of linger for a second on this idea of what the middle is, right? You're talking about a gallery that really has at least one space, has multiple employees, which is to say, has a fair amount of overhead, right?
And doesn't own their space, I think. I think that's another key part of this, because real estate some middle galleries, it's hard to even know what we're talking about anymore, but a lot of galleries who don't own their spaces has an extra challenge. And some middle galleries do own their spaces, and some don't. You know, it's very complicated. And some have one space, and some have two spaces, and it's very varied.
Right. Andrea, I would love for you to kind of weigh in from a slightly more macro perspective, just in terms of this idea of that this, and please correct me if you think I'm mischaracterizing your sentiment, but that the middle is doing just fine, right?
No, absolutely. Look, it's very interesting because the way we look from our perspective of effectively financial service provider to the art market is not so much driven by this concept of small, medium, big, but is more driven by the concept of having a fiscally sound management of the operation and the nature of the art that you tend to transact through the gallery. What I'm trying to say here is that you could be very small. Actually, we have a number of clients that work with us. They don't even own a physical space, as you were saying, Wendy. They transact in a market that can span between $100,000 to $2 million type of artworks. No one would ever think even that they are above the radar screen, but they are incredibly active. They have a very, very sound financial management of their operation, and they tend to be extremely successful. On the other hand, clearly on a no-name basis, I have seen galleries that are, and dealers that are absolutely household names out in the street that have enormous, enormous problems in managing their infrastructure, their financial good behavior. One common element you see out there, for instance, is this idea that the gray line between you as an individual owner of the gallery and the gallery is very gray and tends to present challenge. So what I'm trying to say here is that I tend to agree, this idea of saying small, medium, large doesn't really mean much, at least from the perspective of a financial service provider to the market.
Can I jump in? So Marguerite, do you have the same perspective that the size of the gallery or the size of the overhead or the size of the infrastructure doesn't matter from a collecting standpoint from the actual buy side?
I think it doesn't matter. You can find great art if you're looking for it in a variety of places, a variety of settings. So that really doesn't filter into my thinking. What does filter into my thinking in terms of my own collection and the way I collect is that what I think this wide group that's not the tippy top and not the bottom, those galleries are the places for someone of my generation where we cut our teeth and where we learn to collect. And the reason why we did that is because they were educating, the gallerists were educators and interested and passionate about the artists that they were representing or the show that they just put up. And so that to me is a huge benefit to the gallery system, and I'm really hopeful that that never is in jeopardy.
And yet, just to follow up on this, right, on a certain level, is there a certain way that you perceive of the size of the gallery based on the actual cost of the art that you're buying, right? In other words, a mid-sized gallery, and you're looking at me, so, but a mid-sized gallery which has overhead cannot sell exclusively $15,000 paintings, right? They are going to have to be selling things that are more expensive, presumably. Actually, Marianne, I would love for you to,
I think that, yes, I mean, those shows, we still show artists in, their early 30s, late 20s, where we begin with them. And you can call them lost leaders at the beginning, but you're investing in something long term. And as a business person, you need to manage your overhead so that you can continue to have interesting young shows that don't necessarily cover that month's costs. So you do need to be juggling. It's a juggling act, but if you're able to focus and have interesting threads in your program that relate to more established artists, it's not an unnatural thing to walk into my office and see
a Calzolari with a Jay Hikes. There's a relationship there, even though Jay went to Yale and he's, probably 40 this year, and Pier Paolo is one of the original Arte Povera artists, and he's 75. So and his price point is significantly higher than Jay's, but they're both very valuable artists to me. So they balance each other out.
Do you find that you're selling these artworks to the same people?
Sometimes.
I just want to build on that because we do the same thing, and it took me quite a while to realize who we were and what we were. And I think longevity in the art world's a hard thing to accomplish, but if you can get there through struggling, I don't think any gallery at some point doesn't struggle a lot. So you have to have that personality to persevere and really want to do this. But if you can build a program, like we show a lot of, David Wojnarowicz, Martin Wong, Carolee Schneemann, Betty Tompkins, and these are the artists who sell for more money. But I believe, especially with the estates, where we have more six-figure sales, that by taking a young artist who is a gay artist or artist who's a feminist artist, by building on the shoulders of these artists, estates, and the older artists who are now more established, it's our job to support the young artists and create these opportunities which are socially relevant and really important in changing society. It's not just like I'm selling something so I can
But it also
buy
makes for a rich program. And for me as the gallerist, it keeps me interested and engaged. So, and it was a natural progression to start 22 years ago with artists who were right out of grad school and my age. They were my friends and my peers and my colleagues. But over time, you grow, artists move on, new artists come, and you need to be able to be very adaptable and grow.
The question, though, is, you just listed this kind of all-star roster. You are privileged to actually have this foundation, which you can then kind of use as a launch pad for other artists.
That's not privilege, that's hard work.
That's
what
hard
I was
work.
saying.
Okay,
It's like
sorry.
it's a gift.
Sure, no, that's a great point.
But a lot of the yes, sorry.
No, absolutely, right, and that is hard work, and so is your program. There are other people, though, who, for whatever reason, are not in that position, but simultaneously have comparable infrastructure, or at least this is my perception. I'm curious, Margaret, if you engage with galleries along those lines as well.
I'm finding this kind of an interesting conversation because it's so outside the way I think about acquiring art and learning about art. I understand that individual businesses have hopefully sound business practices and are able to manage themselves. I mean, I assume that in kind of every industry and across vocations. So I don't really think about, oh gosh, I'm going to go, to the Lower East Side and buy some cheap art from a struggling gallery to be helpful or charitable. I think, gosh, that's an exciting program down there. I'd like to learn more about it.
You don't think about the longevity at all of the gallery from what you're buying?
No.
Even if it's a young artist or a mid-career artist?
No.
But you're talking to a pure and real and long-time collector.
And also, a lot of great dealers do burn out and are not good business people. A lot of artists are not great business people either. And
Well, it's a
Marguerite could
horribly
buy the
hard
work.
job what you do
Yeah.
because you have to somehow put together the resources to be both the business mind and the art enthusiast passion mind. And hopefully people do that by having more than one person.
But and the original question, I think, was, is it a struggle for the middle tier? And I think it's a struggle by design. I mean, this is a 19th century model. It's highly capital intensive. Real estate is a huge hurdle. You're dealing with some of the most difficult people in the world, artists, and trying to get them to focus in a business mindset. But, and look, every generation, if you list the top 30 galleries, a few of them survive to the next generation. So it's a struggle by design. But every one of you in this room, you're probably here today pretending this is part of your business world. You're all pretending like you're in the art world for some business reason. We all tell ourselves that. And we try and stay close to the art world. We try, I mean, I'm a banker, but we try to stay close to the art world because we love it. So no one, I think, goes into your profession thinking this is, a great way to have a huge return on my investment. This is a beautiful business to build that's going to kind of scale itself. I think all of us try and stay close to this ecosystem because it's an interesting social place to work, right?
And James, just going back to what you were saying before, and Evan, there is a natural selection process. If you have a gallery and you employ 20 people and you sell $5,000 artists, well, better you are able to generate sufficient volume to maintain your infrastructure, or you made a wrong choice in employing 20 people. So there is an element of, managing. It is a business simply because, as Evan said, it's capital intensive. And at the end of the day, short of you being, like we were saying before, a trust fund kid that can do it purely for passion and no other financial reason, you still need to pay your bills at the end of the month. So survival of the fittest is also survival of the smartest, meaning that people that, like Marianne, like Wendy, they can find the right artist, they gain the credibility in the market, they can stay in the game in the long term. Otherwise, you get kicked out, like in any other business, effectively.
Also take risks. I think if you're
yes.
not willing to be a risk taker, it's the wrong place to be, the wrong business,
For
because
sure.
there are no guarantees here.
May I ask, does the fact that not so many people are going to galleries anymore, does that feed into your the way you think about your program or your?
I do so much thinking about that because I have this incredible footprint on 24th Street of 10,000 square feet, and there was a point where I feel like the art fair model took over, and we were up to, I think that at the highest we did 12 fairs in a year plus our regular programming, and I wanted to kill myself. I mean, it was just too much, and it really watered down what I felt was important, which is the program and the shows. And I know that a lot of people can't make it to shows, but a lot of people still do make it to shows. And the writing and the criticism, bodies of work built over time is so important. And after 22 years, this year I reduced 2018 from 10 fairs last year to 4. And I am really sort of digging my heels back into my gallery and wanting to be there.
Which 4 did you, I mean, obviously this one, but.
So Basel, Switzerland, Basel, Miami, this one, and we had already committed to Dubai before I made this decision, so we'll honor that commitment. Next year, it's not an indictment of the fair system. I don't want to have a default where I've got 10 or 12 booths that I need to fill, and I need to hit up artists to give me material to cover my costs. It's not what I went into business to do. So if I have an artist who's dying to make a show that has to be in the context of Paris at the Grand Palais, like, I'll propose something for FIAC. If there's a reason to put something together, but I'm no longer gonna just have a default switch of all art fairs all the time, and mainly because it doesn't make economic sense for us, and I'm constantly thinking about survival, constantly. So, you talk about middle, like, I thought that I was sort of a middle gallery if I'm not one of those top 3 or 4, and I'm not emerging. My gallery's 22 years old. I have 28 employees. It's a real business. I'm a boutique right now. So, and I want to be boutique. I want to get more boutique. I don't want to have my tentacles out in so many places that I'm running some corporation. It's just not what I set out to do.
Well, I do worry, excuse me one second, I do worry that with these insanely large galleries, whether that's really healthy for the collector and whether it's healthy for the artist, artists need attention, right? And collectors are not egoless. They also want some attention. So I'm just going to go back to the whatever this mid-tier
Right.
classification is.
We're boutiques.
Yeah.
I really think we are, because I still talk to all my artists directly, and I still talk to my clients. And I think when you get to a certain level where you have 150 to 200 staff, your artists are being very well taken care of, and your clients are being very well taken care of, but just not by you. And I don't want to just pay bills and talk to insurance people and bank. Like, that's not what I did this for.
James, can I actually ask a question to the two of them, gallerists, and to you as a collector? Is there a risk that the mega gallery model, the corporation model, because of the large overhead cost and capital-intensive business, ultimately generate price inflation creating effectively a skewing in the market on how really the market behaves. Because again, from our perspective, when we look at art, and we, like it or not, we have to value art because it's what we use as collateral for our loans, the constant thinking that we have is there is absolutely a value, but then when you start dealing with certain type of operations, how much of their cost is factored in to create effectively a skewing effect on the price of the art. I don't know, is it truly a question? I don't know what the impact is and what the logic is.
I mean, I think you see that happen, but it's usually short run. So I think one of the great things about art is that if it's great, it's great. And when it's not great, it's not great. And people don't run for it. So you might have this kind of consensus building or these cartels that get around and support these artists, but the artists have to continue making great work in order for that to sustain.
How important is the type of work? I mean, we do have these galleries that need almost the artists that can manufacture enough works to feed a global demand in multiple spaces. I mean, does that provide an opportunity for you all, or is that
I don't even
know what you're talking about anymore. I've lost interest in the conversation.
She's going to hit you now, Heaven.
Go back to something if
You don't think there's certain artists
before.
that
You said something great, which was we're in a 19th century model, and it's a very intensive labor process where we're carrying art and we need personal, and it's a competitive market, and these conversations lead to thinking about competition and financing and investing. And when I started a gallery, this was not what I was thinking about. I was thinking about that Reagan was president, that I didn't like what was being shown in the galleries I was working in, that something needed to change. So I think a lot about the future, because I agree with you. It's a totally old system, and how can that change? So that's what I'm working to. And one of the small things I have done is I'm working more with other galleries in a very cooperative way. I work a lot with Gallery Lalonde. I work a lot with Hale's Gallery. I cooperate with Annalie Judah Gallery. And I can name a few
What does
more.
that mean, though?
It means that I trust them. We'll take smaller commissions. Our goal is to support the artist. Our names are on both shows. We'll buy things together at auction. We have similar collectors. We're not on each other's territory. We work for the artist together. Then we go to the artist. We help travel shows. So my staff of 10 merges with their staff of 14. So rather than my artists go off to another gallery, they have 2 great galleries working full-time with real people who love them.
Are these handshake agreements?
They are, and all my agreements have been handshake agreements for 35 years. I do have a lawyer in the family who wants to change that, but I said no today to him. But so I think about that a lot, and these are people I really like and I really trust, and I'm not scared they're going to take over something or be in the studio before me, and they're not. And the other thing is, you know, I always say people should buy art, more women's art or more whatever. Do it. I always tell everyone. So New Year's resolution, I decided I would do that. So on a small level, I'm buying art once a month of a woman I don't show necessarily.
Who was the last person you bought?
I bought a piece by, actually I bought a piece by Justin Vivian Baum this morning. So that was fun. And then Judith Lynn-Hars I bought from Englum Gallery, Ed Gilbert, who I love that gallery. So.
And that sounds very pure, but there is, let's not kid ourselves, there's this huge shift amongst galleries to starting to really look at their capital structure, starting to really look at their real estate strategy, starting to form these types of partnerships with very specific legal agreements, because a lot of their artists are getting poached, because we have this tier that is thinking that we've had a gallery system that is run on, as you said, this 19th century model. Every generation, the galleries disappear with the charismatic founder. We're for the first time seeing a group of galleries to say, how can we institutionalize? How can we actually create a global brand that will outlive the charismatic founder? And how can we scale up and make a real business out of it?
Let's talk about specific, if you want to talk about that, give me some specific anecdotes.
Anecdotes of galleries.
Which galleries are saying that they want to have a global business model that outlives their founders?
Oh, I mean, I think many of them are clients, so I wouldn't name names. I mean, you guys could rank the top 10 galleries, but I think a lot of gallerists are saying, yes, it
Top
used to...
10? I mean, see, I don't even understand that.
What?
But that's because you work at U.S. Trust, so you don't have any idea what we do.
But no, you don't.
So-
You wouldn't say that there's a. You don't think there's a shift amongst galleries
There's
to
a
say how
top
can we
10
scale?
in revenue.
Yeah, no, I'm
net
not saying
revenue.
top 10 galleries.
In the top 20.
We're not ranking as a.
Your mic, you need to turn your mic on.
Okay, let me jump in here for a second, because I do have a very specific example. My stepdaughter, Hana Hoffman, who has a gallery in LA. She's had it for 5 years. She's done a beautiful program. I'm absolutely so proud of
Doing
her.
an amazing job.
Her lease is up in May, and she is changing her program for many of the reasons that make the negative argument. She was, she can't keep selling things at $10,000 and keep this beautiful gallery space. But even more importantly for her, she said, I'm tired of dragging people through a white box, and I want to have a space where I can have more intimate conversations and just change the model of working with artists. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like.
It's the most important thing she can do, and the fact that I've survived 22 years is only because there's no straight shot. I had that need too. At a certain point, when I was down in Lower Soho, I was looking in Chelsea already and trying to figure out what to do there. I ultimately moved to Chelsea and rented, kept looking, and then bought land. I went uptown because the market crashed in 2008, and I was able to get a lease on a whole townhouse for $11,000 a month on 64th Street. And I signed a 5-year lease, and it allowed me to do really intimate, sort of laboratory-like shows that I wasn't able to do in my Chelsea space. It's so important that, at 5 years old, that she not just do another 5 years of the same thing.
And I would say, I mean, this
I'll tell you
scaling
said
up
that.
at the high end actually presents a huge opportunity, because I think a lot of collectors are becoming a little bit put off by it. You see some of these galleries that are really trying to become enterprises and manufacture art and push it to all ends of the globe. But we're seeing new galleries in Cleveland and Columbus and Detroit that are actually scaling down, still going with the brick and mortar, creating condo spaces from galleries in other parts of the country that want to have shows in these in these districts that don't have their own gallery system. And we see huge opportunities here. So I actually think the fact that that's going on is not a good or a bad thing, but it's happening, and it's creating, I think, opportunities in what we've defined here as the middle tier to find new systems like the condo system, the pop-up system in non-traditional cities like Detroit, Cleveland, and I think it's a good thing.
James, I just want to make a comment because clearly Evan's perspective going to the top 10 galleries, okay? I suspect that, okay, if he goes for the top 10 galleries, I am the bottom feeder, meaning that clearly the dynamic of the fact that Evan works for a bank, the type of relationship there with their client is primarily driven effectively by the balance sheet of those clients, by the assets of those clients. So the definition of top 10 galleries, clearly we're talking about the top 10 guys or ladies out there in the market that are extremely wealthy, have done extremely well for themselves, have a type of relationship with a bank like U.S. Trust that goes well beyond the aspect of purely their business, but it is also clearly a personal relationship from a banking point of view. When we look at galleries, I can look at the top 10, I can talk to the top 10, but honestly, I talk to the one that have the best art from my perspective as a lender, meaning that the way I look at the arts is like, okay, do you have an interesting artist? Do you have artists that are selling well, that have liquidity? That gives me the comfort to work with you, independently from small, medium, large size, like we were trying to describe before. So there is a slightly different perspective. Are you looking at the art, or are you looking at the balance sheet? those two things can be dramatically different and clearly creates different type of risks and different type of challenges for us as
And the boutique program's much better for the young collector, the emerging collector. I feel far more comfortable sending, a mid-career hedge fund private equity guy that just had a liquidity event down to your gallery to sit down with you to map out a multi-year program than to one of these mega galleries.
Marguerite, you were going to say something.
Well, I was interested in two things that you've said. One, talking in the terms of the mega gallery, we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but that the prices keep getting pushed up in order to fund their overhead for worldwide domination. And I'm going to think about that the next time I look at a picture at one of those places. And then you were talking about you want to work with galleries who have show art that you like, but then I heard you talking about the longevity of those artists and the soundness of their market. So it's really market-driven, what you do, right?
No, absolutely. Look, I mean, there is one side of me, the personal side, that cannot agree more with Wendy and with this emotional, passionate way to look at art. And if you like, for lack of a better word, the social value of what the gallery system and in general, the opportunity for young artists, emerging artists to show their works to the public. There is an incredible social value there. It's beyond, that doesn't need almost to be discussed because it's there. Then, unfortunately, there is what I do to make a living every day. With me, it's really driven by the fact that when I finance galleries, I finance artists, I finance collectors, I finance auction houses, I need to think about the fact that the risk that I'm assuming is the one of the underlying art that they are using as collateral when they borrow money from us. And then, unfortunately, I need to be more selective, and the criteria that I use to be more selective needs to be the one of, is an artist somewhat established? Has it got a volume in the market? Has an history of transaction in the market? Because that's the risk that I'm assuming, which doesn't take away from the fact that those artists are the ones that then create the liquidity that can be reinvested by the gallery into nurturing the more emerging artists, the ones that are less initially easy to sell, if you like.
Sure. And that's a very interesting point. I think that we have is this okay? We have 15 minutes before we turn over to Q&A, and I think that so we're trying to talk about the future here as well, and
there's a crossover though, when you like a painting by one of my artists that's coming up in the evening sale at Christie's, which is the first time one of my artists who I've worked with for many years has come up, and it worries me terribly that it will cross over from being a piece of art, and I wonder what the artist would think if he was here, honestly. And people do ask me that, and I say, I don't know.
Sorry, which artist?
It's David Wanarovich. It's going to be in the evening sale at Christie's. It's a large piece, and it has a $400,000 to $600,000 estimate on it, and they feel very confident. He's having a show at the Whitney coming up in July. So it worries me that, honestly, and it worries me for the artist who I know, and this is sort of the job I have been bestowed to carry on his ethics and morals and the way he wants to be presented. And now it's really kind of out of my hands because a collector has given it. And it will cross over to you, to being a commodity where you will perhaps encourage now people to sell and buy. And I lose the intimacy, I lose the control, and I lose the not the respect. There's a huge network of people who live and breathe by this artist.
See, and I actually think that crossover it's not a necessary thing to be a great artist, but I don't think there's anything wrong with an artist being valued at higher and higher levels.
And I'm coming to terms with it, and it's an interesting
it's a very good
transition
long-term
for
development for the artist.
It's almost interesting. Wendy, what you're saying is kind of fascinating. They said, we're talking about living artists. Okay,
I'm not talking about living
that you have.
I'm talking about a dead artist, though.
Yeah. So no. So okay, but
but you're
in
talking
general,
about living
the
artists.
contemporary artist and the emerging artist and the relationship and the crossover from being emerging to suddenly being traded in the evening auctions, there is that emotional relationship with the artist having nurtured it. On the other hand, I don't know if we can afford the luxury to wait for the artist to pass away before suddenly becomes a commodity and becomes something that it's okay for price going up very quickly, auction houses and collectors filling up the price. So it is a little bit, almost artists being victim of their own success.
Every work of art that's ever been created has been transacted at one point, including every work that went through your gallery. Now, the fact that it's being transacted in a public forum, I think that points to the fact that you've done a tremendous job. You've cultivated and you've incubated and you've developed and shepherded this artist to a level where now it's going to have a museum show, it's going to have a secondary market, and over time you've done very well by that artist. And now it's going to move on to an era where, a new generation of collectors are going to be able to buy and sell this work. It doesn't make the artist a commodity. I mean, there are lots of artists that have secondary markets. That doesn't mean they're commoditized. And I think you've done a great job, and that's, I think, the primary gallery at its finest, no?
Thank you, but I still have difficulty, I guess, with the conversation, and I'm on this panel, and I was interested in it, but talking about investment and money all the time is not what I do on a daily basis. If people ask me at my gallery, and I see they're nervous, it's real money they're spending, and I do say, I think anything you buy here is a good bet. It's very inexpensive relative to what you're probably, investing in and
But that's
buying.
what's so fascinating
But
about
at the same time, I never really, I have to obviously pay my bills, but it's a big transition to see the work. I think everyone wants the next Keith Haring, the next Basquiat, and so this artist is being pushed by forces of the market into this category.
Could the person who owned the painting, would you have wished that they would have come to you and let you place it?
They did come to me, but they want more money, so they went to the convincing argument of the auction house, which is another panel, I think.
You have an artist that's entering the canon, and you should be very proud of yourself.
Artist is in the canon.
Okay, so looking to the future at this point, as opposed to wrangling with the present, you touched on this idea of working and collaborating with other galleries. You do this with some artists as well. Do you guys think that this is really do you think that there's going to be more of this collaboration, more of this kind of unification, if you will, of like-minded dealers and galleries? No.
I sort of think that I like to think of myself as a role model for other dealers opening. I don't think it's going to happen easily, and I think we're in a huge transition in any industry. Every single industry, our ways of thinking are being disrupted, and I think we need leadership in those ways. So in my small way, I'm trying to show a way, and I think a lot of ways that I work with my friends, and is not I think the way the bigger galleries work, there's some kind of or a big business works, or a big department stores work. There's competition, it's capitalism, but I think that it brings a lot of really negative things to our lives on many levels. The 1% or the 1% and the vast majority, and I don't want to copy that model. So I'm trying in my small way to have a footprint that is healthy, and artists can survive, and galleries can survive, and we could be more a community-based supportive system. I don't want to do pop-ups, which I think are fantastic. I'm on a third floor space. I don't want a ground floor space. I'm trying to keep who I am so people can see you don't have to have a giant, huge white space. There's lots, and young people are doing it all the time, and I think it's fantastic.
Does digital work for you at all, or no?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, definitely. Everything. You mean as selling off the website or Instagram? Yeah, to some degree.
Wait, sorry. Let's pause at that for one moment. Then I'd love to hear from you as well. But or actually, Marianne, is there a selling component from online and Instagram for yourself?
I was going to talk about the collaboration.
Great. Okay, collaborate.
But
sorry, I'm just quickly. You sell works off of Instagram?
I have sold some works on Instagram, and I have some clients who really do look at my Instagram and won't call me right away. And
Really?
I'm almost having a secret
I've had
conversation
that happen.
with
I
them.
love Instagram. I think it's amazing.
I would like to.
You can sell that because they know the artist already,
Yes,
right?
Definitely. Well, no,
And-
there's some young artists, but again, some artists don't work on Instagram at all because their work doesn't, that's a thing that started happening when I opened an art forum. People were seeing images in magazines all the time, so the art had to look good in magazines. A lot of great art, like Carolee Schneemann, does not look good in a magazine. You actually have to go to PS1, the show's closing on Sunday, to see the work. But some of my younger artists really got that. They know, and they think that way, And I can put up an image and get of a young artist a really good response, and they themselves have fantastic followings.
So returning to this idea of collaboration, because this is a potential way forward for different galleries.
Yeah, I think it's a choice. It's a choice that I've consciously made, that I prefer to collaborate. I want partners in the world. It's a global art world, and I can't and don't want to be everywhere all the time. So I'm not interested in a gallery of world domination with 13 venues around the world. I'd rather have strong partners that I can trust and work with people so that my artists are well represented in different parts of the world, but with different people, with different ideas and other voices in their head. I can't be the only one, and I don't want to be.
So you make this sound like not a response to competition, but a choice in ways to grow that aren't as intensive for you and your staff. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say it's not as intensive. I mean, we all work really hard. We're all traveling all the time, and it's intense. And I think that depending on, the resources you have at hand and the risk you're willing to take, I'm a risk taker. I'm like the debt queen. I love debt. I can handle it. So I've been able to grow and grow and grow, but you grow, at a certain pace, and I'm ambitious, so I'm happy to keep growing. I always want to change. I don't want to stay small, but I also want to have at 51 a quality of life where I'm not living on a plane. So if I can have a partner, gallery in London or, Berlin that can actually be really effective for my artist and work with me, I would much prefer that. And I'll make less money, but I'll live better.
The intensity of how people work in this business right now is absolutely incredible. Having partners, just more people are crazy every day. The dealers work so hard. We should have all gone to work for Goldman Sachs. We are working those hours, and it has moments of great celebration, but the gritty work every day is unfathomable to most people, what goes on behind the scenes. For every staff person, from the first person you see who walks in to the people you don't see. It's really hard.
It's a personality thing too. I think, and maybe it's even a male-female thing. I don't know, but I don't have, any drive to have my brand out there. I'm interested in my artists being recognized out there. So if they're recognized at an outpost that doesn't have Boesky on it, it's fine by me. So I think Larry feels differently. I think Gagosian is a brand that he wants every one of his artists associated with his brand, and it's a different style of business. I think Marianne Goodman probably makes more money than all of us, and you don't see her having this gigantic brand in every major city, Puerto Rico next week because the taxes are low, and and Greece because spaces are cheap.
People don't see that it's a business strategy. Opening all these spaces, it's not purely like they're so rich and they're just opening spaces. It's a complicated business strategy that, again, is a whole other conversation. It's not just so simple.
And I would say that if Larry Gagosian is the biggest name out there, you think about Marianne Goodman, who at 80-something, she has Paris and London, which she opened at 80-something, which is incredible, and New York, and she has Gerhard Richter and some of the greatest artists, and she's putting her artists out there. So if I could have the dream model, I'd be her. I don't want to be on my private jet, my G5, going to every city every week, with a bunch of people serving me. It's not my goal.
Do you See that we're going to ultimately have a model that's institutionalized beyond the founder, or will art gallery by its nature always be connected
I'm actually so curious to see, and I think that I know that the bigger galleries are starting to make these plans and bring partners in. And I know Paula Cooper has a succession plan, and so there are people thinking about it. I hope it works because these are amazing historic galleries, but we haven't seen it yet, actually.
My one other quick question, we're in an era now where we're seeing lots of artists endowed foundations, artist estates. We're going to see the first generation of living artists who die really, really, really rich with big estates with lots of material. Does that fact have any effect on your model and the longevity of it and being in a position to get these long-term
Well, that's
estates?
interesting, too, when you think about what Sotheby's is doing, and they're bobbing and weaving and trying to find their next, and they're looking at taking on estates and representing families, and, and that's a purely economic agenda, and I think that they're going to have a hard time with that, even with scholars on their team, because ultimately it's an economic agenda. Granted, these families need economic planning, they need tax advice, estate advice, but I've worked with a few estates, and I actually have stopped pursuing estates after I saw what Sandy Rohrer has done with Calder. What he's done with the Calder estate for his grandfather is staggering. It's incredible. And it's a dedicated full-time occupation with 28 people dedicated to that historical figure. And I couldn't compete with that. I could never do it as well as he does it. So, and I don't think Sotheby's or any other gallery really can unless you dedicate a whole team to just that. So I don't know who's gonna, ideally, if you have one of these artists, you're gonna have a Sandy, you're gonna have a family member who, spearheads and really builds something spectacular with it.
So that's a great way to now turn to any questions that the audience has. Is there someone who can give a microphone to, okay, this woman up front in the blue scarf seems to have. Here.
Thank you. I thought this was really a great panel. Thank you very much. I have a question about the 19th century model and how the art world amongst artists is changing. And the artist I'm thinking of is Tania Bruguera, who didn't come up in the normal way of you go to many openings and then you have dinner and then somebody comes to your studio. She's an entirely different model. And I think there are a lot of artists like that out here or there. I wonder to what extent you guys are thinking about that and how it might inflect your thinking about your programs.
I show a lot of artists like Tania and have the same spirit and every artist is different. So I don't know. I think she's a major artist. I think that performance and film is a whole other conversation. It's harder to market, it's harder to capitalize, it's expensive to do, or it's really hard to sell. Not many people buy it, and it's complicated, but it's very important. She's very well supported. I think her show's ending at the museum this weekend, right? But I think we probably both have shown artists just like her.
Yeah, I think that when I'm thinking about programming, unfortunately for my bank, I'm not thinking about sales. So I'm thinking about what adds to the program, what's interesting and relevant, and has hopefully a long trajectory for conversation and dialogue. And sometimes I'm like when I took on Sarah Z in 1996, she was making huge, installations of tiny little objects, and I never thought we would sell any of it. And, the market ended up rewarding her and us by supporting it, not with crazy secondary market prices, but we ended up placing those works in really important collections and institutions because she was adding a stitch, to the fabric of art history. It was part of a conversation that was hard to own, certainly, but worth owning.
I just want to add also, it took me a long time to realize in doing art fairs also, you know, when I started out, I'd do an art fair, Penny and I, we'd be thinking what would sell. But honestly, it's completely the wrong way of doing it. The best way to do it is interest the curators. What are curators thinking about? What are they interested in? And she's a perfect example. So then a curator comes in, and the curators talk to collectors, and you become a group supporting Tania. And that is unbelievably powerful.
It's amazing to see collectors really step up and support those things.
Absolutely.
It's almost like feeds their ego and self-esteem in the process because they're supporting something that isn't easy to support, and they're writing a check for something that's, you know, completely abstract. So it could be a certificate, it could be nothing.
Group effort by everybody working together for that one artist.
Do you take on artists who you think really have almost no commercial viability, but their aesthetic or what they're doing will add to your program?
I have,
broadly?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
It's my
Sarah's is
foundation.
the perfect example. I buy art too. I love art. I support my artists, and I own some of Sarah's work. But there was very little that I was going to be able to own of Sarah's and be able to afford storage for, or you know. And it's been amazing to see the people who step up and support. And so yeah, I'm so glad I did that. And the curatorial support that she brought to my gallery early on. There's a ton of curators that wouldn't have bothered to come to my new gallery on Green Street in 1996. So I think it's really important, and it wasn't a strategy either. It was just like, oh, I got to show this. But my rent at that time was $6,000 a month, and I had one staff person. So it was a different animal.
There takes a lot of vision in having a gallery, like Marianne said. Also, like you have to wear many hats, and you have to have vision. And you have to believe in the vision and convey that with enthusiasm to collectors, to artists, to writers, to curators. And there'll be many times when you can't capitalize on it. But the hope is that eventually people will see what you're doing and you'll be supported, and then you form these liaisons that become really strong, and you end up actually seeing someone go like Sarah to the Venice Biennale. And you're standing there just in amazement. It's amazing, but it's hard, and you need that vision to build a good gallery. And
see, I think it's in that case, it's, you know, a little bit of vision, and then also just a lot of guts. You know, I mean, I was single, I didn't have a child, I didn't have a mortgage. Like, I just was jumping out the window every day. I woke up and I jumped out the window. And, you know, you land, and sometimes you don't land, but you land enough times, and I think that there is a lot of reward for doing things outside the box and taking risks. But it's hard to plan, and you know, I would say I have a great relationship with my bank, which happens to be U.S. Trust, but 22 years of building and not missing a payment. So I've had to land. I've had to find a way so that I can keep going. And I don't wake up saying, wow, I want to go open my gallery today and make tons of money. I wake up every year, you know, looking at my next 12 months, having no idea what artist is going to leave me, what artist is going to, you know, join me, you have no idea. There's no way to predict and plan, but you need to be nimble. If you want to be a gallerist, you need to have a lot of options.
By the way, we're very proud of what you're built.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Let's open it up to questions again. You in the glasses? Yes.
Hi. Thank you for such a wonderful and passionate panel. My name is Gabrielle Segal, and I work for Borrow. And my question is for Andrea and perhaps for Evan as well. So my question to you is, our line of business is predicated on assessing artworks in terms of their risk very conservatively. And nevertheless, my question is, in the long term, how do you see our types of businesses contributing to the ecosystem and supporting the middle market?
Short answers, guys.
I'll try to keep it short. I wouldn't say very conservatively. I would say correctly. And when I say correctly, I mean that clearly we need to manage risk. And so information is paramount for us. And for us, at least for Athena, the relationship with the dealer community, with the galleries, beyond the auction houses, it's fundamental in having more and more intelligence when we look at artwork in understanding what is the liquidity? Is it sellable? Is there a market? Is it priced correctly? And so on. I can only say one thing. I mean, when I started this company 3 years ago, we really started something that didn't want to be a bank, but want to be a lender exclusively to the art market and exclusively focusing on the art as collateral supporting our loans. It's a different model clearly from the traditional banking model that Evan very successfully is carrying out a US trust. We have different parameters, different risk appetite, and so on. But the reality is that the focus was to provide liquidity and to inject that liquidity into the market so that we could create more volume, more opportunities also for emerging artists, more opportunity for collectors, young collectors entering the market and wanted to have financial support in their choice. Look, and I can say that, I mean, at a certain point, I cannot name it, but one of those top three, when we were discussing the business plan of what Athena was going to do, he said, oh, I like it. It creates inflation. And I say, yeah, but it also creates transparency, meaning that we do so much homework that ultimately we try to create that transparency that creates the understanding of the value of an artwork and the evening of the information across the board.
Sorry, transparency for whom?
For the market. Because when you are a collector and you're coming to me and you're going to buy an artwork from XYZ and you want to borrow money from me, I will do my assessment and I will pretty much give you a sense of what is the value where I can see that work and how much money I can lend you, and will give you a sense of how much is that overhead factor in that price. Clearly not with the accuracy to the dollar, but definitely will be very different if you show up to buy a painting for $40 million and I'll tell you, well, actually we think that the liquid point of the market is at 25 for this painting. That tells you something.
I think it would be the scariest business on earth to be doing that with one painting at a time.
Yeah. On a single painting is extremely complex, absolutely.
You know, from month to month, week to week, tastes change.
Absolutely, absolutely. But so there is an element. Look, if you think about it, the simplified version I use usually is this. It's when you buy real estate, you compare that apartment to another apartment in the same building, you come out with a per square foot price. In the art market, you cannot do that. The per square inch price of a Picasso is very different from Picasso to Picasso. Not
there
all
are
Picasso
comparable Picassos.
Exactly. So there are so many more elements and so much more analysis you need to put in there, including what I said, what is the intangible market intelligence, which is really what is the appetite and interest by collectors, dealers for this particular period of the artist, this particular
but then
painting.
Let's say in 2006, 2007, someone comes to you and they want to borrow $40 million for that particular Picasso, and their plan is to hold on to it. But then 2008 comes and they were, you know, a guy who worked for Lehman Brothers, and now he needs to sell that $40 million painting right away. It goes for 8?
No,
then
it
what?
doesn't actually, because that's the interesting part. I mean, the statistical data tells you that in the auction market, the drop was no more than 28% on average. And in the private market, actually, many artwork transacted at prices that were not so deflated,
What I'm
like
saying,
people like
yes,
to think.
So if you had a basket of art to deal with.
Makes it easier, absolutely.
Right. If you have
Absolutely.
one Picasso painting.
It would be a lot more complicated.
Right.
But I have the stamina to stay and wait the next 3 years for the market to come back. That's the
Okay.
difference.
That's good.
Evan, would you like to weigh in?
Just look, art follows capital. It happened in Venice, the Dutch Golden Age, Paris in the 19th century, New York in post-war. So, you know, art will always be, you know, that golden umbilical cord where capital's at, and that's a good thing. So more liquidity in the market's better.
Okay, another question, and we're sort of out of time. So, in the front, in the leather jacket.
Hi, I just attended a dinner with collectors and dealers from outside of the United States, and they are transacting increasingly in cryptocurrency. And I wondered what your thoughts are talking about in the next 5 years, what your thoughts are about crypto.
Anyone want to take this one?
Very briefly, I was at a hedge fund conference yesterday in Deer Valley, Utah. I was sick as a dog, but I was on a panel where one of the largest collectors who's running around here is investing in a company that is trying to securitize art, and he's pulled together 6 other very large collectors, several of them probably clients of both of yours, and you know, they're going to make a run at this. cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and the general ledger and blockchain have been explained to me so many times, and they don't make any sense to me. I don't get it. But people are trying to give it the old college try that at some point works of art will be on some general ledger, and when they're produced, you can buy through Bitcoin either a portion or the whole thing, and it'll be on that general ledger forever. So there are serious folks trying to make a run at this.
Well, let's ask this a different way. Has anyone tried to buy any artworks from? Oh, Marguerite, please.
I thought you were going to say, has anybody up here bought cryptocurrencies?
Oh, well, have you?
Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely. And I think they will be used in the art market, just like they're going to be used at the pizza parlor, and they're going to be used in our financial transactions with our lenders. And I don't know which cryptocurrency it's going to be out of the 1,023 that exist now, but
that is
which one did you buy?
James,
hold on. Which one did you buy?
I have a lot.
Oh, okay.
Of different ones. I think I challenged myself last year to understand this because I don't want to become a dinosaur, and I felt like a dinosaur a bit in this discussion. But it's fascinating, and the technology, the blockchain technology, I think is going to be it's just obviously disruptive, but it's going to become pervasive, and you either get on the train or not.
So just one point I want to make. First of all, let's try not to confound the concept clearly. The blockchain technology is a technology, is not cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is a form of currency security, we can debate about this point, that has been issued in a free way because fundamentally the regulator missed the boat on that. The SEC just issued an avalanche of subpoenas to everyone that has been issuing cryptocurrency in ICOs and has been transacting in terms of trading platforms for cryptocurrencies, because they are fundamentally in violation of securities law. So will cryptocurrency survive? Absolutely. Will they be called as another form of security that gets issued and works on an exchange rate as a way to make payment for art as much of real estate as anything else? Absolutely. But the reality is cryptocurrencies, as they are, people love to talk about cryptocurrencies, but the reality is that it's nothing, meaning that it will be a valuable investment if it will be properly regulated and will be treated alongside the same way other security get issued in the market.
Yeah, I don't know that. So I think that cryptocurrency to me is as foreign as buying and selling art is to a majority of the universe who doesn't really operate in our small art world. So
but I bet your artists are interested in it.
Oh yeah, and that whole generation. So I'm interested and fascinated, and I actually think because I can transact and trade art all day long, I know how to do it, I'm comfortable in that zone, that there's gonna be a whole generation of people who are super comfortable in this crypto zone that, and the art world hasn't been regulated, and look at the scale and the stakes that have grown. I don't see the regulation being any.
Do you understand that the volume in cryptocurrency are millions of times the times of volumes of gets transacted? The art market, it's a pimple, pardon my French, compared to the size of the cryptocurrency market. So cryptocurrency are pervasive. That said, I like to think about a cryptocurrency the same way you would transact in euros with me if I come and I want to buy a painting and pay you in euros.
I think it'll happen.
It will happen,
yeah.
Sure, but it's another currency.
Would you accept Bitcoin for a painting?
I would have to do some research. I'd probably have to call a lawyer. I have no idea.
You have to call Evan to hedge your exposure.
Right, or I'd have to, call the bank. I have
I must say, I'm quite surprised. The one person up here I did not expect was trading in Bitcoin is sitting to
but
my
here's
right.
The thing. If somebody came to me and said, I want to buy this painting for that painting, or this sculpture for that drawing, it's that, for me, I can assess that, immediately, right? But the average person can't.
Sure.
So it's very similar.
Have either of you been approached with someone trying to pay in a cryptocurrency?
No, I have not. I don't have an aversion to it. I mean, it's another way of, a dollar is a pretty abstract thing, so cryptocurrency is a pretty abstract thing. And if I can buy things with cryptocurrency, then I'll sell things in cryptocurrency.
Yeah, no, Panama is as far as I've gotten with attempts.
Do we have time for one more question, or are we? I'm given a sort of not really. Okay, so unfortunately we have to wrap this up. Yes, because we've run over. Sorry, I could have just looked at my watch. Thank you all so much for being here and for being so interesting and for sharing your insights. Really, this was a really wonderful hour.
Thank you.
Thanks.